Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Two Blokes podcast. I'm Taz, and I'm here with me mate, Dead Duck, and we're around the campfire trying to get it all sorted out. Duck and I discuss men's issues, our challenges, our hopes for the future of men and boys, and occasionally our own blind spots. Pull up a stump and join us. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about marriage and traditional family life and conservative family values and everything that goes with, because there's still this, I'm trying not to say the word delusion, but this misconception, that advocates for men and boys have only just this one motive for doing what we do, which is that we want a return to Father Knows Best and Ozzie and Harriet and all of that. And among ourselves, we know that's not true. And we know that some of us, myself included, don't believe in traditional marriage, at least not as such. But everybody then starts wondering what the alternatives are, and some of them are pretty extreme. I do believe that the popularity, or at least the predisposition for men in particular not to be looking for marriage very often anymore, that the marriage minded guy is kind of a remarkable item in today's day and age. And of course, the other side of that coin is that that attitude is met with disappointment or indifference or resentment or frustration or fear. And probably rightly so. I mean, there is a lot of social breakdown that extends from men actively making the decision not to be husbands. Not that complicated, and it's not that surprising, to respond to that by saying it's no longer, a viable option. It's just not something that a man can look at and say, this looks like a good idea. But at the same time, everyone seems to agree that or not everyone, but many people seem to agree that something, has to be done to correct or renegotiate or fix that, because it's starting to hit home kind of to everybody. And anyway, I have a lot of observations about why I think this is happening, and why I think that of all the issues that we talk about, this one is really, other things are in line ahead of it. And those other things not being addressed means that there is no solution to that problem, and it will progress. It will get worse before it gets better. And the longer it takes to fall apart, the worse the falling apart is going to be. If it was all just catastrophically over with tomorrow, that would maybe even be better, because still a lot of people around that remember how it used to be. But if it takes 6 generations, who's going to know? But anyway, so that's my kickoff. What do you guys think?
There is something to be said for traditional values, the family unit, etc., etc., etc. Unfortunately, the way the culture has gone in the last 60 to 100 years, you're right in what you say. It's no longer a viable option. It's no longer a sensible option. It's not something I would advise anyone to do, particularly. Men and women are not in the place, in both individually and as groups, where being in that kind of relationship is a good idea for anybody. We all need to sit down and have a good word with ourselves, and try and fix whatever problems it is with it that we've got. And in terms of this idea of fixing the marriage contracts, you'd need to have a darn good think about what that's going to look like, because there is also something to be said for the biological essentialism, essentially, in that if you leave men and women alone, they will go down a preset path to a certain point. But I don't think anything can be done in terms of marrying and living together and what have you until we've got feminism out the way. I really don't. And I'm not saying that because I don't think women should have rights or anything else. The two are completely different things. Feminism is a hate-fueled ideology. The idea that women should have human rights is a no-brainer to anybody. And so until such times as feminism has been dealt with, we shouldn't even be thinking about relationships really. I say that as somebody who's in a very good relationship. So yeah, that's my initial thoughts, Katrina.
Uh, well, I mean, so we had our meeting earlier, and as was pointed out very obviously, I am of the younger generation. And it's hard because the younger generation, not only is it that right now it's hard to have marriage because of toxic feminism, really ruining marriages and causing a lot of issues within marriage and really needs to be sorted out. And we need to change quite a bit within the structure of marriage, how government fits in it, and how movements and rights and all those kind of things fit in it. Also, the fact that just marriage is such a commitment, and a lot of people in my generation aren't geared towards commitments at the moment. They've grown up in this very automated world, in this very superficial world, in this world where everything is temporary. And so to think of making a permanent decision is actually somewhat complicated for them to comprehend. And so then we sit here spending more of our time trying to figure out why it is that, we would want marriage. And it's not that marriage is bad. We do need marriage. We need that kind of connection. We need that kind of bond. Marriage is very important to the economy, to the world, but it's not something that's at the current moment something people want to really think about.
Yeah, I experience a lot of that kind of, I guess, indifference or avoidance when I hear from younger people about, but like Dad, what you were saying about this obstacle of feminism, has to be sort of dragged off the field and disposed of before that conversation can even start. Now, my position on that is good luck. Like I say, if that's the core of the conflict, it's just going to remain permanently asymmetrical. What I mean by that is because of the way that movement, and that philosophy is designed, it'll it will always morph into something that nobody wants to move, or at least not enough people want. But I think one thing even most feminists would agree on is that misandry has to be dragged off the field before we can have that conversation. Of course, their attitude about it is that along with misandry being dragged off the field, misogyny has to be dragged off. And most of the actual men's advocates that I know of, are right on board with that. We're not at all. We are not interested in not liking women. We're just not. We look at that and say, that's nothing to, right? I don't want to not like women, and I don't not like women. It's not that complicated. But the correspondent of, not liking misandry, not liking the sort of intuitive distrust of and resentment toward and dismissal of men and boys, that's a different creature. I mean, it really is. And I think that bears like really drilling down to say to someone, and I say, look, you want feminism in the body of equal rights and protections and opportunities, and encouragement, support for women that you convince yourselves men have always had, which is that's the most arguable part of their whole position. But I mean, if you really believe that you're missing these things that men have always enjoyed, we're fine with that, right? We really are. But we are useless to you, and we are of no value to you until after you stop disliking and distrusting and dismissing us. I mean, again, the important thing to me is always have those things in their court, to say, look, you're not philosophizing about anything we're objecting to. You're not. But your actions and your day-to-day behavior and the policies and ideas that come from it seem to target us as an adversary that we never were, and if you can't get past that, the rest of this isn't going to work anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, and so like, just let it go. It's like, make a choice. Either insist that your brand of feminism is actively anti-misandrist, and aggressively anti-misandrist, then what, of what value am I to you? What would I be able to do? Nothing. And so, that it's like, I have no place at this table, but ultimately it always comes down to individual relationships between men and women, which for, a couple millennium meant one form or another of permanent union. And that's the time, say, we've pointed out that misandry, and the rejection of men is our number one problem here. But you get that off the table, do you still want to live with us? The answers are either yes or no. Pick one. Because at that point, that's all going to be on you. For our side of it, the damage is done. Your very popular complaint about men these days is, what sad examples of admirable masculinity we are. So, well, that didn't arise in a vacuum. It came from somewhere. Now you have a reclamation project in front of you. Is it worth it? And be as serious as you can be, and just say, look, this is this is a flooded building, okay, with a lot of water damage, right, and a lot of corrosion, and a lot of broken interior, right? If you feel like it's still worth putting back together, then get to getting, because time is ticking, and you don't have forever. And if the answer is no, it's not worth it, then, like I said, there's no reason not to be misandrous. I don't want to answer that question for any feminist. I want them to answer it for themselves with a clear understanding of the consequences of both decisions.
Yeah.
To either continue disliking and distrusting us, until the wheels come off, right? Or roll up your sleeves, right? And grab your unwilling cohorts by the scruff and say, we're going to go in there and we're going to fix this. We're going to do it now. We're not going to wait until tomorrow, right? Or until after the holiday. We're going to go in there and we're going to do it now. And we're not going to be asking more from them than we're asking from ourselves. Both of those sound very difficult to me. They really do. I mean, I don't kid myself for a second that a reclamation and a reordering, of all this stuff is going to be easy, right? And it's the ones that are going to pay the most for the longest time are going to be Katrina's folk, because they have to live a long time. I don't.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I just say, well, if you would have started 30 years ago. But anyway, like I said, that's what I would say if I was in the company, and it's what I do say when in the company of fairly assertive, feminist leaning people.
Yeah.
Is just to make it clear that there is nothing about what you're doing that you can't keep doing until it all falls apart.
Yeah.
There's no like magic hand in the heaven that's going to swoop down and stop you. It'll keep happening until you either stop on your own or until everything comes apart.
Which is, I think, part of what feminism is trying to do. The problem is, I say that's what feminism is trying to do. You get so many different people that self-describe as feminists, and they say, well, that's not my type of feminism. And Karen Strachan has said it on many occasions. Fighting feminism is a bit like trying to sword fight a fart. I would put everything you just said even more bluntly. You either carry on creating MGTOWs and incels, or you start coming together with men's rights activists, because we can see it. Even if you can't, we can see where this is going to end up.
Yeah,
you don't have to like us. At the end of the day, you don't have to like MRAs, but we can see what's happening. We can see where this is all going to finish, and we've got our hands out, and the bus is coming at us at 500 miles an hour.
Exactly.
You've got two choices.
It isn't just because MGTOW and incels, they occupy a certain pretty extremist place that
Mm.
isn't, I mean, my opinion, just not really sustainable place in all of this, that you, for us to point to and say, you're going to have more of this.
Yeah.
But I also point to like the red pill community
Yeah.
and the pink
Mhm.
pill female dating strategy, and say, the MGTOWs and the incels are one thing, right? And they're either more or less manageable depending on how aware people are of them. But
Mhm.
this stuff over here, this really artificial and inhuman engineering of relationships between men and women, right? I mean, the power structure and the economic framework that we're all in loves that stuff. It really does, and it will do whatever it can to encourage it, right? And I'm gonna say, I don't know which is worse. I mean, you guys know, I firmly believe in in disengagement, but only as a means to an end, right? And that disengagement is it only encompasses traditional romantic intimacy. For everything else, I will show up and I will suit up.
Mm.
Someone was telling me a while back that the stumbling block to like larger groups of just women getting involved with MRAs is that that we don't seem to like them, and then they ask me, why are you so different, right? And why do you like us? Matter of doing what works and like avoiding what doesn't. And what do you mean? Well, I speak openly. I'm very honest. I'm very firm, but I'm also very rational and open-minded. But I say I have gotten nothing but really positive and really supportive feedback from those people, mostly women, yeah, almost 99%, but people in general, they react very well to how I am. And I said that, I expect for that to continue for as long as I don't try to sleep with any of them. And at that point, of course, I get kind of a glassy stare. I said, look, that's, for the time being, that's off the table. I have found that I don't need that, and I have found that I get along with you a lot better when I avoid it. Whose fault is that, right? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like I didn't set that up. That's just the way it played out. And then, then they have to have a harder conversation about how they really feel about men.
Yep.
But it's, especially most guys don't have that kind of patience. So they turn to Andrew Tate, Rollo Tomasi, and Pearlie and all that. And it's like, that's just pouring gas on the flame.
Exactly. Exactly.
I don't know, Katrina, what do you think?
And I don't want to backtrack too much because you did say a lot, but Dead Duck brought up the thing with feminism. And I think something I want to bring up with that, just like real quick, is that I don't think we're ever fighting feminism, because feminism may as well not exist because the name is out there, but something cannot exist if it doesn't have a foundation. And feminism doesn't have a foundation at all because everyone changes. It's just a terminology that's floating about. And so we're not fighting against it because it's not there. We're fighting against the inequality for honestly everybody. We're telling everyone the hard thing is you're going to have to open your eyes and you're going to have to take care of the complicated stuff. But the good thing is after you take care of the complicated stuff, you'll be okay.
Well,
And
the common wisdom is that because feminism isn't a foundation of its own, that it arises from really kind of what's called vulgar Marxism. That its only purpose is to provide cover for, and to I guess you would say, like, support and further the cause of hard to say, kind of tanky leftism. And that's why it always looks like one is sword fighting a fart, because it basically is always it's always presented as a outward face, right?
Mhm.
You know, it's not what is really intended, right? So they can literally make it whatever they want it to be.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, without a moral compass, you know, it's admirable because it's very effective, right? The only problem is that without a moral compass, and this is the thing that real leftists kind of don't believe, without a moral compass, without something, you know, for the next generation and, you know, generations down the road to take with them, then after a while they won't bother with it, you know, they will just revert to savagery because it's a lot of hard work, you know, and it's a lot of personal sacrifice. People that come from that are in cultures that tend to stay in place, you know, they make sacrifice, right? And they, you know, act selflessly, but they do it because they know that morally, you know, good old morals are upheld, you know, for the good of everybody. And, you know, like I say, this really crude and unnuanced version of leftism, that's what it's for. And if they can use, you know, the degradation of the position of men in the culture as a weapon, they're happy to do it because they're not interested in the moral failings of that position. You know, they don't care about it because they don't believe in moral. They believe
Mhm.
engineering the culture is the way to go. And I said, you know,
Which doesn't work, as we can see.
no. Or, you know, most of the time I think it takes too long, you know, it takes too long for what they envision to become a reality. And in the meantime, there's starvation, you know, and disease and ignorance and civil disorder. And then, of course, you know, a really authoritarian type leader comes along and says, hey, follow me. You know, I have the answer. I can get you out of all of this, right? That's the even now, that's the hook that the right, you know, the right wing extremists use all the time. Can't count the number of times that I've been approached by very right leaning people, don't give a damn about men's issues, you know, but they will start talking to me about how much, you know, they sympathize with me and yeah, it ought to be different. And it's only because I've kind of done my homework. I look at that and say, you don't care about me at all, right? You don't want you don't want me to be you don't want to be with me. You want me to be with you, you know, at my own
And that's
expense.
the hard part is we only really feel like we have two sides in politics. There is no third side. It feels like you can only choose from two. And we know that neither side is interested in doing what morally needs to be done to correct things. They aren't interested in solutions. They're interested in a paycheck or in an agenda or something.
Yeah.
And people are so stuck in the mindset of having to do I mean what they're doing is they're playing on the competitive side of human nature. They're saying there's two sides. Which team are you on?
Yeah. And the nice part, you know, whether I'm in company with a lot of very leftist people or a lot of just very feminist people, is that among them, it's really not that hard, you know, to encourage a moral intuition, you know, and to encourage them and cast doubt, you know, on their ideology just by saying, you know, okay, and then we do what? And how long do you think it will take? And, you know, what will it cost? Right. You know, and what are you willing, you know, to give up in favor of this, you know, this bright utopian future that you're talking about? Because, you know, I mean, in this day and age, it's not that hard, you know, to point to things and say, right now we have this, you know, and it isn't, as you say, you know, it's not a binary of left or right. You know, it's a failure, and it's you know, a smudge on our culture that everybody is either ignoring or participating in. And you know, the only way to make that not happen anymore, right, is to give something up, you know, and be willing, you know, to concede some things, but while at the same time, remaining firm in what's really important to you. It's not that complicated and not that alien, to be self-sacrificing and selfless, if you know that in the long run, it's going to be better than what there is now. But it's like the one thing I don't do is approach people that are happy with the status quo, because they're happy. I don't have anything to sell them. They already have what they want. My job is to make sure that there are fewer of them, like year after year, and then get them isolated and get them put off to the side and say, the status quo is bad enough for enough people that maintaining it, isn't worth it. But say that's not easy.
And to be honest, the status quo is something that really is created from just, a reflection created from what's on the news, from whatever the news chooses to put. And so the status quo becomes whatever the news puts. And then we have the situation we're in where people are hearing about hookup culture. They're hearing about, they're hearing toxic feminists make articles and they're thinking, oh my God, I should be doing that too. That's one of our biggest issues right now. The status quo is about a reflection, whatever they want you to see, and people copying it. Woke culture is a great example of that. The majority of people in woke culture do not actually know what they're talking about. They're just reposting. They're not reading. They're not discussing it. They're just reposting it. They're hopping on the trend train.
Yeah.
They're joining it. And so marriage got thrown out. It was no longer the thing that the social quo, status quo, sorry.
Right.
The status quo was advertising. And so now people aren't really getting married. They don't want to get married. And now, I'm not saying back then there wasn't a reason I get married, but the status quo of that starting to replace it started a while ago. But now there's much increased harmful reasons for both sides not to want to get married.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the idea of marriage as we've all come to know it, that as Dead Duck was saying, there are other things in line ahead of, that, like I say, we either get them straightened out or we don't. But if we don't, then in a few generations, concepts like marriage will be, like a dim memory. And, people will try to adapt themselves to getting along without it and just believe, it's like people get to where they just think, well, that's the way things are, and that, the way it used to be is just no longer available. And I mean, my position on that is, probably true. But we then you have to say either we can do better than what we're doing now or we can't, and neither one of those is free, right? If we can do better, then there's all this work to be done. There's the reclamation of men, and their position in the culture and in communities and all the rest of it, and there's also the reclamation of the, I guess, concept of men in the minds of women and girls. I mean, that's probably the first job, and
well, that's the thing is, when we're talking about the past, a person you and I all know, had once mentioned to us that part of what broke down marriage was people wanting to take away the power from Black men during the civil rights period, who had very much power through brotherhood and fatherhood and family and being heads of family. And that helped start the divorce system and the family court system. And its way to corruption is wanting to take away that power from them.
Yeah.
And just that, to do that, they had to create a fear. They had to create a fear of the African American men. And that fear then rippled across. It went from African American men to white. We have to also add Hispanic men and Asian men, and now it's all men. You have to fear all men. And so that's the thing, is we're all inherently taught to be fearful of men. And that builds up to then saying, well, why do we have to be fearful? And the people who are older speaking out, going, oh, you have to be fearful because they do this, this, and this. And not teaching them, oh, yes, some of them do this, this, and this, but not all of them, and there are ways to change things. And to be honest, you're you're capable of this, this, and this. You have
Yeah.
to make sure not to abuse it.
Right. Then it goes from being, a discussion to a bar fight, right? Because, for every like expression that, some men are like this, there's always going to be the corresponding expression that there are some women like, and like I said, with moral consideration off the table, the first thing we have to do with ourselves is admit that it worked. I can't think of a time. I'm 61, almost 60, and I can't think of a time in my lifetime where, there was so much antipathy toward men, even largely among other men. And I'm like, that what's going to happen as a result of that is there will be more men, that will be worthy of that antipathy. They will give you, we will give you reasons to hate us. If you if you hate us just blanket, then we will conform to that. And that probably isn't going to work out. That's not a good long-term strategy, but it is, I hate to say it, but it is very satisfying, to just have a natural distrust and a natural standoffish, toward men. I don't really suffer any of that anymore because of, just my aptitudes and the way I live my life, right? But if I were to change that around and start using, the kind of person I am specifically so that I could get dates, I would end up being where I was all those years ago in a month, and I'm like, I'm just not going to do that. That's up to the world to fix for me, because as you were saying, Katrina, there will always be reasons for us to, throw mud at each other. There will. I'm just not going to do that. If that means I have to be alone, well, then I'm going to be alone.
That's the sad part. Is that's the point we've reached, is people have concluded that the only way to be safe is to be alone
Not just safe but happy.
and happy.
Which,
Yeah. Well,
that is sad. That is sad because it's the loneliness aspect of it. Yes, I'm very, very comfortable in my own company because I spend 5 days a week with myself. I kind of have to be, but it's also very, very nice when I'm home over the weekend, and if not just my children giving me a hug, it's my partner as well. It doesn't have to be about anything more than that. Just a simple hug or whatever can be all you need sometimes. Yes, the other physical intimacy is quite nice. Don't get me wrong. We all enjoy that, but it is what it is. But there's so much more that needs to be sorted. I think before we can even start looking at marriage and family and everything else, the family court system, for instance, has to be sorted, because they're still working, I believe, even though the courts will tell you different, they're still working on the tender years doctrine, which on paper is almost inarguable, but the effects that it has had on society, families, and everything else is irrefutable as far as I'm concerned. And it's not been a positive effect either.
Yeah, and these things result from and come out of the contrast between the poetically chivalrous, idealized male archetype, as opposed to just guys. I mean, we are not, as a demographic, we are not anything like that. We're just not. And the longer that goes unrecognized, and the longer value in just guys goes uncultivated, like I say, men conform themselves to the environment that they're in, whether it's the weather environment or the cultural environment or the economic environment. It's what we do. And going back to what is the purpose of feminism, it's to, like I say, to encourage us to continue conforming ourselves to the environment that we're in. Mentioned the family court system. That is an environmental component that men have to conform themselves. And like the Me Too movement is a cultural component that men have to conform themselves to. Nobody, like affirmative action for women, men have to conform themselves to it. They have to adapt to it. Nobody in, driving all that ever said, what's the cost benefit analysis? What will doing this cost, right? And like I said, now everybody's in a panic over the state of men, right? 60 years on, and like, well, what did you think was going to happen?
That's it, isn't it?
and,
No.
and of course the answer is, well, we didn't consider that.
Exactly.
We didn't think, and then it starts feeling like you're talking to a kid, like, well, just, the kid's yanking on the tablecloth and the vase falls off and breaks. You look at them, the first thing you say is, what were you thinking? And they have no answer, right?
Yeah, well, all this damage has now been done. It doesn't look like it's repairable. Oh, well, we never foresaw this. Anyone with 2 working brain cells could have probably told you this is what was going to happen. If you go down this path, at the end of the day, you're going to cause massive social upheaval. You're going to damage a group somewhere along the line, and it'll be damage that you can't come back from. So the question is, what do you do now?
And that's where, a real and, like sustainable negotiation comes from, to be able to say, what we had before, we're not going to get back. Just let it go. It's okay. We can do something else, but we're not going to be able to do it alone, and we're not going to be able to do it competitively. We're going to have to do it collaborative. But, like I say, when I look at things like red pill ideology, or female dating strategy, I just look at it without a, moral compass. I just look at it and say, either this will work or it will not. And everything in front of me tells me it won't. Like Katrina, you were talking about the the liberal strategy for how to deal with like minority issues all the way back when I was a kid, right? Without, as it happens, I'm fairly convinced that, that was just a liberal corporatist power move. They wanted more control and more, support from those communities. So what they did was plunder, the resource of men in those communities and put them on the corner, as many and as often as they possibly could. And my assessment is they were able to do that. What they were never able to do and will never be able to do is handle the aftermath, handle the results of it. They did get what they set out to get. They just can't believe that it didn't all just work out sunshine and roses. And as you say, spreading it out so that all the men get a share of it, and that it continues to, get worse year over year, tells me that they haven't learned their lesson, that they haven't learned that some strategies are sustainable and some are not.
I don't think they care, quite simply.
That's the point. I mean, they don't have to pick up the check. We do.
Yeah.
We face the consequences of what their actions are. And to me, it's a whole lot more important, to let people know that, if we are at odds with each other, and if we're, adversarial to each other, then, everybody is fighting the wrong foe, because the ones who are really responsible, they're sitting back and laughing.
Yeah.
They really are.
Yeah.
Even again, among men, tell them if you honestly believe that the problem is women, then, the people that are really doing this to you are going to keep doing it to you from now on. They will never stop because they have no reason to. And the more you take it out on or disengage with women in general, feminists even in particular, the harder they're going to laugh, because that's you and them picking up the check, for their free meal. And nothing anybody can do about it until we stop squabbling and, put ourselves together and deal with clean up the mess and move on without the people that are plundering us.
Picking up the pieces.
it's a lot of work. People ask me why I don't get mad, and I'm like, because, what I see as the real solution is not a small tap. Like, you guys know, my big thing is men's mental health. And, I have an understanding that addressing and redressing men's mental health is going to take a long time, and take a lot of resources, a lot of money, and it, even if it works really well, right, and the best possible outcome, it's going to be really uncomfortable for a lot of people for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't make that kind of proposal lightly. What people, at least believe they want is some magic spell where suddenly all the men wake up tomorrow and they're, positive and, well adjusted and hopeful and cooperative and nice. I'm like, I just don't see that happening anytime soon.
Mhm.
I just don't.
There's too much damage done
Yeah.
for that. Far too much.
Right.
It's
Mhm.
going to take. Excuse me. It's going to take more time than the three of us have got combined left.
And that's okay.
And then some.
Yeah.
I
think-
mean, it's one of those things where, the old cliche attitude, makes a lot of difference. And just being able, like for you, Katrina, just being able to say to yourself, this is not going to resolve, in your lifetime, but that's okay, because, as long as we're headed the right direction, your life will be better than it would be if we keep doing what we're doing.
Mhm.
And I mean, you're, like, I hate to keep using you as an example, but you're such a good one, that your future long term, there's a few different ways it can go, right? Some are better than others. It's not likely, that there will be a series of major catastrophes to overcome, but there might be one or two. And the difference between collapsing under it or recovering and being okay is going to depend on all the other things that happen, right?
Oh.
I mean, you're one of these rare birds that looks at the condition of male and female relationships and says, if this keeps on, then if something bad happens to me, it's going to be a lot harder to deal with, and it's going to be a lot harder to to want to deal with. But
to be honest with you,
you're not common.
I think, to be honest with you, Katrina's great grandchildren are going to be listening to these podcasts, if that's even possible,
Lord.
and they're going to be going, "Why didn't everybody listen to great granny?"
I know.
That's how bad it's going to get,
Oh,
and that's how
God.
long, it's going to take. And they're going to say, not only why didn't we listen to great granny, but why didn't we listen to these two older men that she was talking to?
Mhm.
Maybe I'm just cockeyed optimist, but I agree there is a chance, but that would be the worst possible outcome is why didn't they, but rather, for them to
Yeah.
recognize, that Katrina, great grandma, was wise enough so that the other great grandmas that were in her age group began to listen and take it seriously, and like I said, that's going to be the difference between success and failure.
I have to say that's typical American optimism. I don't foresee it. I really don't. But maybe
you guys are
that's
making
just...
me worried, man. Sorry. Wow, that was the most casual thing I've said on here. You guys say great grandma, and this goes back to the marriage thing. I'm like so nervous about that whole thing. I'm like, oh God, I don't want to leave, like, kids in this world that make grandkids and great grandkids and great grandkids and great grandkids still in this
Yes.
miserable world that's not fixing itself.
Yeah,
this is the thing, though, isn't it? It's I'm being pessimistic at best, if not downright negative, but it's not going to change in my lifetime. Obviously, it's not going to change in Leslie's. So unless there is some miraculous turnaround, and unless people turn around to the more radical elements of society, shall we say, and tell them to shut up, go away, go and live on a desert island somewhere with nothing, just yourselves,
Yeah,
we're
but
not gonna change anything. We're
The
not gonna
problem
change
is
anything.
motivating people too, though. People aren't
Yeah.
motivated to do anything today anymore at all. They're like, I mean, it's bad, but I'm living a comfy life.
Yeah,
And they feel no need to get up and do something. They don't realize less. I believe you're the one who said it. It's like a frog boiling in water. We're like a frog boiling in water right now. We have no idea it's coming.
And like I said, the not to blow too much sunshine, but the point is, it isn't just recognizing that things have gone wrong and that what we're doing now is unsustainable. But I will also say that, Katrina, you're not the only woman I know who has this talent. But it's the talent of being able to say, yes, things are messed up, but at the same time, I'm not gonna I'm not going to react to it emotionally. I'm going to use my head, right? And I'm going to use my head in spite of the social pressure, because let's be honest about it, there's social pressure among women to like pick a side, so to speak, but do so emotionally and kind of blindly. That there are plenty of women out there who just kind of say no, and say, I'm not going to pick either side. I'm only going to act on what I know and what I see. And if you don't like that, go bother someone else. And that's probably what it's going to take. Again, back to the great grandma thing. Really, among women, the only heroes, or if it works out well, the only heroes are going to be the ones who didn't panic, right, and kept their heads about them and did that which was right, even at their own expense. And I mean, let's face it, it's kind of always been that way. The male hero has always been the one, Dead Duck, like we've talked about this, who was willing to go on the journey, right, and willing to to sacrifice and know that coming back to the village things were going to be different. But among women, it's always been that they were just wise. They were just smart enough not to be fooled by one side or the other. Like I said, it seems to me like that's the way it's just got to be. I mean, I'd be fine if it was all up to men. I would say, well, we're in such bad shape, it's gonna fail. I mean, it would just be it would just be a done deal. But because I know it isn't all just up to us, that's where my optimism comes from. That that's not a done deal either, but there is a shot. There is an opportunity.
The question is, who will take the opportunity?
Well, you do. I know others who do. I mean, I know it looks different from the inside. You're just living your life. But from the outside looking in, I look at that and say, this is example of a woman, like I said, being wise and being adaptable, being humble, and being loyal. And so, in other words, just proof of concept. I point to you and those like you and say, don't tell me that can't be done, because there they are.
The issue is whether they want it to be done, whether they're willing to do that, whether they're ready to sort of fight the hard fight, fight a battle uphill.
What's your college major, Katrina?
Finance.
I think you might need to change it to politics, my dear. Let's
In very terrible things, I'd like to point out that Donald Trump was our president.
I know, followed immediately by Sleepy Creepy Joe.
Yeah, exactly.
And this again, proves the foolishness of both sides. Is everyone was just so like shocked and outraged about the polity choosing Donald Trump, in 2016, and the equally disappointed by the reality that we've also chosen Joe Biden. That means it's our fault, not theirs.
Yeah, I think we need to get the tall lady into the White House in the future.
Yeah.
Well, in this country, it's actually possible. Actually, I didn't realize this till recently. Did you know there's no age restriction on running for mayor?
Yeah.
in most states,
Well, there you are then.
cities. Had no idea that was the case. Always assumed that you had to have an age restriction. Then I found out there was an 18-year-old who got voted as mayor in Iowa.
Yep.
But let's be honest, you're not going to be doing any worse than Laurie Lightfoot, are you? So, you know,
Fair.
good grief.
Well,
Oh,
like I said, though, you know, if when I tell people, you know, who are kind of unenlightened and just despairing, you know, that that it's possible to do better than this, you know, and I don't very often talk about politics when I talk about this. I still just talk about people. I say, look, you know, Ed, like you just said, right now the mayor of Chicago is Lori Lightfoot. You know, what a disappointment, right?
though
But
she was also voted in because of the fact that we had just too many candidates. We had so many people running because
I know,
people couldn't make up their mind, and then it came down to her and so long ago I forgot who, but someone else.
yeah,
And people decided, well, it's not the two people I want, so I'm just not going to vote.
yeah,
And she won because the people who came out to vote were the people wanting her.
yeah. Basically, yeah, she ran pretty much unopposed, but like
She
I
won by a
said,
minority, not a majority.
yeah, yeah. That, you know, in other words, you know, there are people walking around the streets of Chicago who could very easily, you know, do a better job of administering the office of the mayor, you know, but they're not doing it because they don't, you know, there's no percentage in it for them. You have to be able to give them something. And like I said, you know, somebody Ded, like you, Trina, like you, I like to think like myself, you know, we understand that rewards are not always, you know, goody, right? You know, just not always just stuff for us, right? Sometimes rewards are, you know, relief from the BS,
Mm.
right? You know, and that's a lot of the time, you know, it's worth overcoming some hurdles and doing some work just for some relief from the BS, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
All right, guys. Are we all set here?
I think so. Yeah.
We're
Any,
good.
any final thoughts? No?
Just to put it upon. Oh, go first.
You know, marriage is I don't know if sham is the right word, but it's certainly not a positive right now. And I don't know when it will be again. And I don't know how long it is going to take for the damage that has been done over the last 60 to 100 years is repaired sufficiently for people to start considering marriage again. I'll leave you two to your own thoughts.
I was gonna end this. Right now, it does feel like sham, and there's a lot that needs to be worked out. But I do want to end this on a slightly positive note. Know that that does not mean you cannot get married and find someone who truly loves you. There are still people out there. You just have to be very safe by your choosing. Remember to think logically. Think about the person's personality. Think about how they treat others. Think about the way they treat you.
Very well
And
put.
yes, you never know what gets pulled last minute, but just know that it's not impossible. We're not saying you can't get married. We're not saying don't get married. We're saying that be cautious of marriage.
Very well put. You know, we started this conversation out declaring that, you know, we have more immediate issues to address before we can even talk about things like that. And, you know, I think we've just proven that, that, yeah, there are, you know, for there to be an environment in favor of pair bonding, much has to change, you know. But like Katrina just said, that does not mean, you know, that that there is no hope for, you know, pair bonding. It just has to be dealt with differently than, you know, our parents and grandparents went at it, and that's okay. You know, maybe it's just time for that. But you know, each person individually in their own head and their own heart has to decide, I will be wise about this or I won't. You know, neither one of those is easy, but one is worth it and the other isn't. All right. Well, thanks both of you, and thanks
Thank you.
everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll see you again next week.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.